Good morning, Larry. Thanks for doing this.
Good morning. Jim, do you mind if I just say a few things before you get started?
Go ahead, sure.
Thank you. I believe that the coverage of my candidacy by the LA Times has been immensely unfair, grossly unfair. To call me the black face of white supremacy is beyond the pale. You also had another writer who all but called me a black David Duke. I find that enormously, enormously offensive. Your newspaper twice endorsed Barack Obama. There's a picture of Senator Obama standing next to a smiling Louis Farrakhan, who in my opinion is the nation's leading anti-Semite. Alan Dershowitz said had he seen that photograph, he never would have voted for him. If you ever wrote any article scathing about Barack Obama standing next to Louis Farrakhan, I never saw it. If Larry Elder stood next to David Duke and was smiling, I would dare say you should write a scathing piece about that and should say that I should get out of the race, but I don't see the same kind of thing on the other side. Al Sharpton is a Democrat kingmaker. If you Google Al Sharpton and Democrat kingmaker, you need to stand back. This is the man who during the Crown Heights riots of 1991 said if the Jews want to pin their yarmulkes on their hat, they can come over to my house and get it on. That's just one of a series of offensive things this man has said over the years, yet he is a Democrat kingmaker. And if your newspaper ever wrote anything denouncing Al Sharpton for those kinds of things, I never saw it. He's in the streets of Ferguson yelling, "No justice, no peace," before one word, Jim, one word of testimony was taken. And as you know, the officer was completely exonerated. So this thing has been completely unfair to me. You have looked at stuff that I've said years ago out of context. I've been on radio for 27 years. Most of my career I was on for 4 hours. That's almost 27,000 hours of radio. I've also been a syndicated column since April of 1998, never missing a week. I think 1 week I took off for Christmas. The LA Times has never published a single article I've ever written. LA Daily News carries my column. Orange County Register carries my column. You guys have never printed a single column that I've read. I published about a half a dozen books, including collections of my columns. 2 of my books were New York Times bestsellers. 2 of them were LA Times bestsellers. You've never reviewed any of my books, even negatively. I did a documentary that came out last year on Juneteenth called Uncle Tom, An Oral History of the Black Conservative. It grossed more money than the 5 films that were nominated for Best Documentary combined, had a higher IMDb rating than any of the ones that was nominated. We hired a consultant to contact a bunch of newspapers, including yours, to try to get somebody to write something about it. You never did. 2 people in your newspaper over the years have written I've written pieces about me. One, a guy named John Mitchell, which I thought was a fair piece. Another one named Patrick Goldstein, who I think is still with the LA Times, also wrote a fair piece. Outside of that, it's been radio-free silence on Larry Elder my entire career, even though I'm from Los Angeles, from the hood, went to public schools, the kind of story you guys love to talk about on Spectrum One, which I get. I get Spectrum One, and on the morning, there'll be somebody from LA who's been an artist, somebody from LA who's a writer, somebody from LA who's a dancer, somebody from LA who's a filmmaker, but you've never, ever, ever interviewed me for any of my stuff, ever. It is completely unfair. I know you don't like my politics. I don't like high taxes. I don't like high regulation. I want to cure borders, all of which you guys are opposed to. You supported, for example, Proposition 16, for crying out loud, to use race again as a factor for college admissions and for hiring and for contracting. And when the voters in 1996, I think it was, voted against that, you guys wanted to restore it. I think it's a racist agenda, a racist bill, and yet you supported that. So calling me the blackface of white supremacy, calling me all but a David Duke, that's the premise here. So I hope this doesn't degenerate into a witch hunt. I hope this really is a friendly or a fair interview with the 2 of you, but I have my suspicions.
Okay, well, I'm glad you got that. We're able to get that off your chest. And I understand that you're not happy with the LA Times coverage.
Well, are you happy with my being called the blackface of white supremacy, Jim? Is that okay with you?
I'm not really here to comment on our last 30 years of coverage of you or our recent.
No, I'm talking about the last week.
Yeah, I'm not really here to represent. Yeah, that's a column by one of our colleagues, and I'm.
What do you think of me being called the blackface of white supremacy, Jim?
You know what? I want to do an interview with you about. You mentioned the John Mitchell profile. What John actually was one of my first colleagues at the LA Times. I enjoyed his profile. The only thing I'll say about that and past coverages, we haven't covered radio much at all in the last 25 years.
I'm also an author and a filmmaker and a columnist. I'm more than just radio.
Okay.
And John Mitchell did not call me the blackface of white supremacy.
Okay.
This happened in the last few days. I'm just asking you, what is your opinion about a columnist that you guys have hired
Okay.
calling Larry Elder the blackface of white supremacy? You have an
Well,
opinion?
what I'm really hoping we can do with this time is talk about, you're saying you want us to give you a fair shot, and we want to ask you about some of your history and your past. But we're trying to give a full view of you now, and we've talked to a lot of people, including some of your friends like Dennis Prager, Stephen Sachs, Miss Stewart, your colleague, and Miss Stewart is from KBC. So we are talking to people who are, some of your biggest fans in doing this profile. So and what we'd like to do now, we have very limited time, is talk to you about your career in radio and 30 minutes is a short time. So I hope
we're only 9 minutes into the interview. So you're not going to give me an opinion about whether or not you think it is fair or unfair for Larry Elder to be called the blackface of white supremacy.
I'm not going to comment on any of our coverage at the LA Times. I want to start right now afresh with this interview and try to, get some information from you about your career. You just said we aren't paying attention to it, and I'm trying to pay attention to it right now. So can we start?
We can start.
Okay. We've talked to a lot of people, as I said, from KBC and from your other endeavors in the past, and including some of the folks, who managed the station in the past. When you left KBC the last time, when you got fired, there were complaints from some of the folks inside. I saw you wrote about it and said you believed you were kicked off the air because you had written, I believe it had something to do with the Clintons, but what we were told is they had thought you were too much one note, you were talking too much about race, and that you should diversify your content of your show. What, in your opinion, really led to your being let go back then, the last time you were at KBC, 2014, I'm referring to?
I've been on radio for 27 years. I've done 27,000 hours of radio. Most of my career, as I said earlier, I've been on for 4 hours. I've said lots of things over the years. I'm just curious as to why you're focusing on this. Many people in radio have been fired. Rush Limbaugh was fired. Howard Stern was fired. It's not uncommon for people to be fired.
Right. Well, you wrote a column on it. I mean, so you focused on it yourself. And I just wanted to see, do you disagree with that characterization they had, that you were too focused on one issue and they wanted you to diversify? And we just want to know what your, a fuller view of what happened back then.
One more time, it is not uncommon for people in talk radio to be fired. It's not uncommon for people in talk radio to have clashes with their bosses. You saw the movie Private Parts with Howard Stern. You saw he got fired over and over and over and over again. It's no badge of dishonor to be fired in talk radio. I was immediately hired. And by the way, immediately made a syndicated host. I've always wanted to be national. I was not national when I was at KBC. So frankly, the firing was a blessing in disguise. I became a syndicated host, and now I'm in 300 markets, or I was until I was taken off to run for office.
Okay. And you also, just quickly, you didn't miss a day, did you? You went up streaming the very next day after you left KBC, I believe.
I did, because I anticipated the firing was coming, and so I wanted to make sure I was ready to go. I didn't want to get off the air, and I wasn't off the air. Okay,
and you did that out of your home studio. You were ready. You had everything set up and ready to go immediately.
I did.
Okay. I wanted to ask you too about, in the past, you've written and talked a lot about affirmative action. I know it's something you believe is inappropriate. You also acknowledged, I believe, in the John Mitchell article and some of the articles in the past, that you benefited from it when you got into college. How do you square those two things?
Fine, let me comment on that. I resent the assertion that but for affirmative action, Larry Elder would not have been successful. There are thousands of colleges in America. One would have fit my test scores and my grades. I graduated near the top of my class in high school. I had very good SAT scores. So I would have gotten into a competent university anyway. Secondly, I think there's a difference between admitting somebody and admitting somebody with glaringly lower test scores than everybody else. And frankly, I think that's happening all too often right now, which is why often when you have people who've been admitted under special criteria, which is I think the way California used to describe it, you find the dropout rates much higher. After Proposition 209 got passed, the people's hair was on fire, claiming that Black people weren't going to be able to get into UCLA and UC Berkeley. And it turned out, it is true that there were fewer Blacks and Hispanics getting into UCLA and UC Berkeley, but more of them got into UC Riverside, UC Davis, schools like that, and the graduation rates were better. Also, the people that got shafted because of this were Asian Americans. It turned out after Proposition 209 got passed, the percentage of Asian Americans at Berkeley and UCLA went up. So I think it is unfair to lower standards in order to achieve some sort of racial diversity, particularly when the standards are lowered so much that those people that supposedly benefit end up dropping out. If you put somebody in a campus where the pace is too fast, they're not going to be able to keep up. So the idea is to make sure we don't have mismatches. Richard Sander from UCLA, who's a liberal who voted twice for Barack Obama, had written extensively about the way UCLA had dramatically lowered standards in order to have so-called racial diversity, and the people that were hurt were the very people that supposedly benefited from it. That's my position.
Okay, and just to be clear, was there ever a point at which you thought that preferences were appropriate, and then we reached a point where there was no longer enough of an imbalance, enough discrimination, or were you always against those kind of racial preferences?
I'm not sure that I ever really thought all that much about it early on. Again, I always knew that I was a competent student. My grades were very good. My test scores were very good. I don't believe that but for race-based preferences, Larry Elder would not have gone to a very good college. I would have gone to a very good college no matter what.
Okay. Let me ask you about the sage from South Central. Obviously, it's been a big part of your identity in your career. Talk about your connections to South Central or South Los Angeles today. Do you still spend a lot of time there? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I was just there the day before yesterday. Well, I was born in Pico Union, not in South Central. That's near downtown.
Mm-hmm.
My father bought a little house there, and when we moved to South Central, he tore down the house and built a little restaurant that he ran until his 80s. We moved to South Central Los Angeles in 1959. The house is still there, and I visited South Central regularly when my mom and dad were alive. The house, as I mentioned, is still there. We rented out to a tenant. I also have been back to Crenshaw High School to speak before the students, and not in a while, but I was invited back. My understanding was that it was well received, and the newspaper, school newspaper, wrote a very, I thought, positive piece about the speech that I gave.
Okay, and you said I think you were there just a day and a half ago. What brought you down there then?
Paula Ingram was doing a piece on my roots. She did a piece in front of Crenshaw High School, and then we went to the house in South Central Los Angeles. By the way, Jim, I went to actually 4 high schools. I went to Washington High School, which was the first high school that I went to for 1 semester. It was the nearest high school to my home. And Crenshaw was completed. And then I had exhausted all the Spanish at my high school, and there was a program called APEX, which stood for Area Program Enrichment Exchange. And I was bused for 1 semester to Dorsey and for 1 semester to Fairfax. And that is one of the reasons, Jim, why I'm so staunchly behind the idea of choice in school. I realized the difference between the quality of the school that I was in, Crenshaw, versus the quality of the school that I was in Fairfax. It was night and day. I thought I was gifted and brilliant. And when I walked into the first day of this Spanish class at Fairfax, these kids were fluent. I mean, fluent. I didn't really believe you could learn how to speak a language fluently in the classroom setting. I realized that you could, and I realized that the expectation, the demands on the kids were night and day compared to the expectations and demands on kids at Crenshaw. I came home that day and I was crying. I told my mother what happened. My mother started crying. And she said, I know your father and I should have put you in a much better school. We didn't have the money. Maybe someday you can grow up and do something about it. Well, that day is here. And I am a staunch proponent of choice in education. The money should follow the child rather than the other way around. The majority of Black and brown parents, by the way, support school choice. The number one impediment to that is the teachers union, and they are the number one funder of my opponent. If you look at studies that show where teachers send their own school age kids, they're far more likely to put them in private schools than families that don't have public school teachers. So I think it's a ripoff. 75% of Black boys in California cannot read at state levels of proficiency. Almost half of third graders cannot. And 80% of the students in government schools in California are Black and brown. And they're the people that the left loves to say they care about.
What year was that you were at Fairfax?
It was probably 1968, 69, around in there.
Okay, and just one other quick one on education stuff. You told a story in a talk you gave once about going through a book of the presidents and your mom saying, hey, you could be in that book one day. Do you happen to remember, was that how old you were when it sounded like you were probably elementary school age, but I couldn't tell.
I remember it vividly because we were on the steps of my old house and we moved in 1959. So it had to be when I was around 7 years old. It was an illustrated book of presidents from George Washington to the then incumbent Dwight Eisenhower. My mother went over every single one of these presidents. When she closed the book, she smiled and she said, Larry, someday you can be in here if you want to. I never, ever aspired to running for office, let alone to be president. My point in telling the story is not that it predicted someday I might be president. The point in telling the story is to show that my mother, even back in 1959, believed hard work, perseverance, and you could realize your potential. And I use that to show that now, with the election of a Black president, re-election of a Black president, a president, by the way, who got a higher percentage of the white vote than John Kerry, we ought not be talking about systemic racism and how racism holds people back. That's the purpose of that story.
Right, right. And so that would have been at the Pico Union House, out in front. Okay. All right.
1230 South Valencia.
Okay. Yeah, no, that was the takeaway from I understood the point of the story. Thank you for clearing that up. Harriet?
Hi, Larry. Nice to meet you over Zoom. I read your memoir, and a lot of the things you just said were in there, including the incident at Fairfax, where you aced your Spanish presentation. I'm sorry?
A memoir that you guys never reviewed.
Oh, yeah, I don't think I was, well, I don't work in the books department. Let me ask you about I was going through the acknowledgements that memoir.
Wait a second. I'm having trouble hearing Larry right now. Can you guys hear him?
No.
You guys hear me?
Now
yes.
I can hear you again. Sorry, we just lost your audio for a second. Thank you.
I just wanted to say regarding that book, I don't normally brag on my own stuff. I'm a very tough critic of my own work. But if you go on Amazon and just look at the reviews, just look at what people are saying about the book. It is off the charts. People are saying it's the best book they've ever read. It calls them to rethink their attitude towards their father, calls them to reach out to their father. I could not get arrested with the Los Angeles Times despite numerous inquiries to try and get you guys to write something about that book. It's called Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours, about the 8-hour conversation I have with my dad after not speaking to him for 10 years over really a very foolish argument that I had with him. And I think it's a deep, profound, important book. It's not about politics. It's just all about relationships within families. And I think it's the most important thing I've ever written.
Okay. Thank you. I'm not a book critic, but I found it very moving, especially the beginning as a parent. In the acknowledgements, I was looking for people who've known you a long time that you would thank in your memoir. And so I called Will Kuhn, and he had a lot of very wonderful things to say about your performance as an attorney right out of law school. And he called you 1 in a million and your character. However, he also talked about a falling out that you guys had in 2016 and his just sort of crushing disappointment in the end of a relationship that was very important to him. And it appeared to be very important to you because of the way you acknowledged him. What can you tell us about that?
Will is one of probably 3 very good friends I've lost because of my support for the last president. I never have understood his reaction to my support for the last president, because I am a registered Republican. I haven't voted for a Democrat since 1976, and that was Jimmy Carter, and I regret that. I'm going to vote for the standard bearer of the Republican Party in 2024, whoever he or she is. So I've never quite understood why he felt so disturbed by my supporting a Republican over Hillary Clinton.
He says it's because of the disability issue, because of his son, Jesse, a person that you've known and loved throughout Jesse's life, that it was the mocking of the disabled reporter that just could not get past, that you wouldn't at least acknowledge that moment of what he saw as misbehavior by the candidate Trump at that time.
Actually, what he was upset about is his assertion that Donald Trump had mocked a disabled reporter. And I wrote Will a 3-page letter, including a website called Catholics for Trump, showing the mocking gesture that Trump has used to mock himself, to mock other people. And by the way, the report in question does not have a gyrated motion that Donald Trump was using. Donald Trump was using that motion to mock the reporter for retreating on a story the reporter wrote, in which the story said on 9/11, there were people who were Muslims who were cheering the fall of the Twin Towers. And then when the reporter was contacted because people thought Donald Trump lied about it, the reporter said, well, I'm not quite sure there were that many people. I'm not quite sure there were that number of people. And Donald Trump mocked what Donald Trump perceived to be the reporter retreating on the story that he made. I sent that letter to Will. I sent him the website, and I told Will that Donald Trump was not mocking a handicapped reporter. You were wrong. Will still insisted that Donald Trump was mocking a handicapped reporter and was mad at me for still defending what Donald Trump had said and done. One more time, that reporter, I don't remember whether he's with the Washington Post or the New
York Times.
Oh, good. He has an atrophied arm. He doesn't go like this. He doesn't do a gyrating motion. And by the way, Donald Trump used the same motion to mock a able-bodied general who he thought was retreating on a position he had taken. Donald Trump has used that same gesture to mock himself. Will is wrong. And people that say Donald Trump mocked a handicapped reporter are wrong. Yet Will did not change his mind. I can't change his mind, and that was really the thing that really bothered Will. But even more broadly, he hates Donald Trump, as do at least 2 or 3 close friends I used to have, and I have no relationship with them either. And again, I don't understand if they expect me to vote for Hillary Clinton. I'm a Republican, for crying out loud. I'm going to vote for the standard bearer in 2024, whoever he or she is.
Okay. I just wanted to ask, I have my questions here, so I'm just going to launch into the next one. Speaking to, I had an opportunity to speak with Mike Horn, who I understand is your manager, and other people in radio. And some of them said during the 90s and the 2000s, the audience for the Larry Elder Show was had a very specific demographic, that it was senior citizen white men by like 80%. I'm not an expert in radio demographics, so I wanted to ask you if you shared that opinion, and then why do you think that is your audience?
Mike Horn is not my manager. He's an agent who negotiates my contracts, A, and B, I have no idea what the demographics are. All I know is that my ratings were high. In 2554, which is the primary demo people are concerned about, my ratings are high. You don't stay in talk radio for 27 years if you have lousy ratings. We get a report card every single month. And if you don't do well, you're out.
Okay.
Can I ask you about another person that became a big part of your show, and then, well, I'm curious about how that continues now, if it does today, was Stephen Miller, the Santa Monica High student who you brought on as a teenager, as a young kid, and he became a regular on your show. I think both of you have talked and written about that. And I wonder, obviously, Stephen Miller became quite an outsized figure in the Trump administration. Are you, since he's credited you with helping like create him and make him the person he became, are you proud of the person and political figure he became, that he has become?
Well, Jim, I was the first person to ever put Michelle Malkin on TV or radio. She credited me with being the first one to do that. The editor-in-chief of Breitbart, he also was an intern of mine. He's credited me with giving him a first job in conservative radio. Carol has credited me with inspiring him to go into conservative commentary. Andrew Breitbart has said the same thing. There's a syndicated illustrator named Antonio Branco. I was able to get him his syndication. And there have been others that I have encouraged. I'm just finding it fascinating why you're focusing on Stephen Miller. Can you explain to me why this is important? I've had many guests on my show over the years, including Gloria Allred on many, many times, including the former police chief Bernard Parks, who later on became a Democrat councilman in LA, had him on once a month for years when he was police chief. I've had other left-wing people on. Kwesi Nkrumah, the former head of the NAACP, has been on my show. I just wonder why you're focusing on Stephen Miller. I've had Dick Cheney on my show as a guest. I've had Donald Rumsfeld on my show as a guest. Why is it that you're concerned about Stephen Miller?
Well, Stephen Miller, I think, is a character of a lot of interest to us, but he is a local, person who came up here in LA like you did. I think he's interesting too, because I wonder, I had a follow-up question, which was—
Gloria Allred is not interesting?
We interviewed her. I interviewed her about
Yeah,
you.
we've talked to other people, as I said before, and including Dennis Prager, one of your greatest supporters, who had great. I think I'm losing you a little bit again.
I said, I don't just mean Gloria Allred as a person. Gloria Allred was a guest numerous times on my radio show. Why do you focus on Stephen Miller and not on Gloria Allred is my question.
Well, we've talked to Gloria already. We've talked to Dennis Prager. I just wanted to ask you about Stephen Miller because, again, he's a figure of interest in our both in our community and nationally. But if you don't want to talk about him, that's okay.
I just wanted to know why he's a figure of interest to you. I think he's a figure of interest to you because many people dislike him. They think he's a racist or a bigot. And I think that's why you're bringing it up. But maybe that's not your motive. In any case, I'll answer your question.
Okay.
He was on my show when he was a student at Santa Monica High. He even invited me to speak at Santa Monica High, which was also interesting because the principal said the only condition under which he'll allow Larry to speak is if there's another left-wing speaker to offset the conservative message I'm going to give. And when I went to the school, I asked the principal, who had just, by the way, had a union leader speak, did she ask a conservative to speak to offset what the union leader said? And she was very nervous about that and never gave me a response. Anyway, Stephen Miller came on my show over the years a number of times. We followed him as he went to Duke University. And by the way, Stephen also came on the show during the time the stripper was falsely accusing the Duke lacrosse team of assault. Stephen was suspicious about that. He turned out to have been right. He then got hired by Jeff Sessions in Washington, D.C. I believe I had him on once or twice when he was working for Jeff Sessions. He then worked for Donald Trump. I think the last time I had any conversation with Stephen was when I sent him a letter shortly after Donald Trump got elected because someone wrote me, who was a military vet who was dying and who had one time done security for Donald Trump and wanted somebody from the Donald Trump administration to say something to him, to acknowledge him before he died. Stephen Miller arranged that. That is the last time Stephen Miller and I have had any contact whatsoever during the Donald Trump, during the entirety of Donald Trump's presidency, either by mail or by a carrier pigeon or by anything. And the last time I spoke with Stephen Miller was probably about a month or so ago when he and I were on Fox News together. He sent me a text saying, nice to hear from you. I sent him a text back saying, nice to hear from you. And that's it.
Okay. But you haven't had a falling out with him, or you're not saying that. You're just saying haven't had.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we had absolutely no contact during the time he was in the Trump administration. My feeling is he was busy and I was busy. Okay.
And he's been noted in the news. One reason he's had such a high profile is because of some of the policies that he was the author of or helped construct, like the Muslim travel ban, the policy that separated.
It wasn't a Muslim travel ban. It was a ban of some countries. Some of those countries, the population was largely Muslim, but it was not a Muslim travel ban. Otherwise, Indonesia would have been banned. It's not fair for you to call it a Muslim travel ban, Jim.
Okay. Was there anything that you saw him do during his time in the White House that gave you discomfort, or you felt like, well, I kind of part ways with Stephen there?
You have to be specific. If you're asking me about the travel ban of some countries, did that bother me? No, it didn't.
Okay.
Anything else? Am I bothered that he did something about illegal immigration? A court just said that Joe Biden should reimpose a Trump era policy that Joe Biden had stopped following. Do I feel that what Stephen Miller did was wrong in stopping illegal immigration? No, I don't. I don't believe in illegal immigration. I think our borders should be secured.
Okay. Thanks for covering that. I'm not clear what the ground rules here. I talked to Yang a little bit about, obviously, Ms. Dadig has been in the news a lot lately. I had some questions that have nothing to do with her allegations in her police report, just about
Jim, as I noted in my email yesterday, Ms. Dadig is off the table.
Off the table? Oh.
So I know it was an email that was a bit later in the day, so perhaps you didn't see it. We did chat briefly about this yesterday, so that topic is off the table.
I am going to deny brandishing a firearm loaded or unloaded at anybody at any time. I'm going to deny any allegations of domestic violence. Beyond that, I'm not going to comment. There has been a, quote, police investigation opened up, close quote. My attorney has contacted the police. They have not returned the call. So beyond that, I'm not going to say anything.
Okay, we'll leave it at that then. I wanted to ask you about another part of your history at KBC. One of the folks we talked to said your salary got up as high as $1 million a year. True?
And that is relevant because?
Well, I would guess it would show a degree of your success in the business. $1 million a year is a lot more than Harriet and I make together and multiplied many times. We find it impressive. But if this person who seemed quite authoritative
I've done well. I've done quite well.
Okay.
Larry, can I ask you, I'm sorry, I'm still thinking about how you related your breakup with Professor Hune. And I guess a lot of Americans can probably relate to falling out over Donald Trump. I think that was a really, unfortunately, common family situation. Is it worth it? Like, how do you decide, 37-year friendship, and it sounds like there are other people, he was the best man at my wedding. You're the godfather to one of his children. How do you decide that the politics are worth it?
Did you ask Will whether it was worth it breaking up his friendship with me?
I did. And he said that, he has a child that, and that it is an extremely sensitive and topic for him, and that he didn't expect you to change your politics, but he wanted you to acknowledge that. It felt critically, sorry, go ahead.
With all due respect, I know him better than you do. And
yeah.
It wasn't just the child. It primarily was Donald Trump, whom he felt was a fascist. He thought Donald Trump was Hitlerian. He even used terms like that to me. So it was far, far, far beyond the disability thing. And that's the basis for which a whole bunch of people in America lost friends and lost family members, because they had this unfair perception of Donald Trump. 83% of Democrats believe Donald Trump is a racist. I don't share that view whatsoever. This is a man who presided over the best economy ever for blacks. He pardoned Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion. That was a 15-year effort led by people like Ken Burns and Sylvester Stallone. Barack Obama didn't pardon him. George W. Bush didn't pardon him. Donald Trump did. Donald Trump expanded so-called opportunity zone for people in the inner city. Donald Trump put funding for historically black colleges on a 10-year basis. Donald Trump pardoned a woman named Alice Johnson, who had gotten a very long non-violent drug offense. He also did criminal justice reform. He also did a law.
Barry, I understand we have so little time. I understand your support for Trump, but you and Will really respected each other on multiple levels for 4 decades.
Trying to explain to you is I thought the basis for which he ended the friendship was unfair for all the reasons you now mentioned that you don't really care about hearing.
No, it's not that I don't care about hearing it. It's just that this is a profile of Larry Elder, not Donald Trump. But I understand that.
May I ask for clarification? So, Larry, you seem to be saying that he ended the friendship, and having lived through the Trump era and having been involved in some of the politics during that era, it seems that oftentimes it's people who are very who very much dislike Trump, who they tend to end the friendship. So is that the case here, that he ended the friendship with you?
I don't feel I ended it. I feel he ended it. I feel he was unfair to Donald Trump for all the reasons I just mentioned. The man is not a Hitler. He was democratically elected, for crying out loud. It doesn't even make any sense. And I think anger towards Donald Trump, Will, by the way, is very left-wing. He's always been left-wing. We've always known that he's been left-wing. He's always known that I've been a conservative. Somehow we were able to navigate through that until Donald Trump came along.
Okay.
And you think this is irreparable, Larry? You don't think you'll ever resume your friendship with him?
I hope it's not irreparable. As far as I'm concerned, I'm more than willing to revive the friendship as he is. Maybe you can arrange that, Jim.
That would be nice. That would be good for all involved, it sounds like, but I don't know if I have those powers.
It would be good for the country, because I think much of the country afterwardly went ballistic over Donald Trump's ascendancy to the presidency in a very unfair way. Hillary, by the way, had for 4 years referred to Donald Trump as having stolen the election, called him illegitimate, to the point where 2/3 of Democrats falsely believe the Russians changed vote tallies, even though the Senate report found no such finding whatsoever. So I think a lot of people have become really emotional and unfair, allowed Hillary to continue to say Donald Trump was illegitimate, yet the social media platforms of Hillary were never shut down, even though she was promoting, in my opinion, the big lie, close quote, about the 2016 election.
Can I ask you a question about campaigning for Donald Trump? I had a chance to talk to Sheriff Clark from Milwaukee County, former sheriff, and he described touring with you in a couple battleground states. And, you know, he said that you were able to have conversations when you're waiting to go on or at dinner about the challenges of being Black and conservative. And that despite the fact that you guys grew up in places that are very different, that you found some commonalities, and it was something you talked about. What do you remember of that?
Well, there is a challenge being a Black conservative, because sometimes major newspapers have columnists refer to you as having the black face of white supremacy, and a column that basically calls you the Black David Duke. So perhaps you might ask some of the writers of the LA Times about the challenges of being covering a Black conservative.
We do have to wrap up. One more question, and then we've got to go.
All right, Larry, I wonder how you feel about, obviously the polls are showing that you have a pretty good chance of winning this thing. If you don't, how do you see the future? Like, where do you see Larry Elder a year from now, 2 years, 5 years from now, if you're not governor of California or headed to some higher office?
Don't be so negative, Jim. What do you mean? I'm going to win this thing.
I just said you have a good shot, but if you win, we know you're going to be in Sacramento. We'll know where to find you. If you don't win, we're not sure what your plan is.
If I don't win, you'll know where to find me too. I'll be right here. I don't know what my plans are going to be. My life has changed forever. A lot of people feel that I can do something about the crime and about the rise of the cost of living and about the rise in homelessness. A lot of people feel I have some interesting things to say about the way Gavin Newsom shut down the state while ignoring science, while having his own kids enjoy in-person private education. A lot of people feel that the issue to escape poverty, to get to the middle class, is to get a quality high school education, which inner city kids are not getting. I'm going to be a strong proponent of school choice, whether I end up in Sacramento or not. So my life is going to be changed forever. A lot of people, I think, have invested a lot of energy in me and feel I can do something about the water shortage, do something about the rolling brownouts we're having here in California. And I think I have something to lend to that discussion. So I'm going to stay in that discussion. I don't know quite sure what my journey is going to be, but my life, Jim, has now changed forever.
Okay, well, that seems like a good note to end on. We know you're not happy with the LA Times. You made that abundantly clear. So we appreciate you, despite that, being willing to take these minutes with us. We know you're busy. And yeah, thank you very much. Again, thank you, Ying.
Thank you. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you, guys.
All right, bye-bye.